My brother's hand slammed onto the kitchen counter, rattling the silver cutlery. My 6-year-old twins flinched, pulling their hands back from the dining table as if they'd been burned. "Keep your hands off. Your mother should have fed you already," he roared. He snatched the plate of food away, throwing paper napkins at them, while his own son sat across the table, smugly opening expensive custom cake boxes. I looked over at my father, expecting him to intervene, but he just scoffed, took a sip of his coffee, and muttered, "Plan better next time, Sarah." The room grew deathly quiet. I looked my brother and father dead in the eye, my voice dangerously calm as I replied, "There won't be a next time." I grabbed my kids, walked out the door, and drove away. But they had no idea what I really left behind in that house. By midnight, my phone began to explode. Panic had officially set in. 88 missed calls. I lived my entire life believing that family was a safety net, a group of people who would always catch you when the rest of the world let you fall. My name is Sarah. I am 28 years old, and it took me a long time to realize that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you actually need protection from. For the past 3 years, I've been a single mother to my 6-year-old twins, Toby and Chloe. Balancing 2 jobs while trying to give them a decent life meant that my days were an endless cycle of exhaustion, but I did it willingly because their smiles were my only fuel. In our family, however, there was a strict hierarchy. My older brother, Marcus, was the undisputed golden boy. After our mother passed away, my father handed the entire family bakery business over to him, treating him like a corporate savior, while I was pushed to the absolute fringes, treated like an inconvenient outsider. Last Tuesday, my father called me out of the blue, his voice carrying a rare, urgent sharpness. He insisted, almost commanded, that I bring the twins over to Marcus's luxurious estate for an emergency family celebration. Marcus had just landed a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate contract that would secure the bakery's future for generations. My father hinted that a major family announcement was coming, one that would change all of our lives. Despite the underlying tension, I wanted my children to share in their family's joy. I had no idea I was walking straight into a trap. The moment we pulled into Marcus's sweeping circular driveway, a familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. His sprawling Granite Bay estate loomed ahead, a flashy monument to unearned arrogance that perfectly broadcast his sense of superiority. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Marcus's wife, Vanessa, paced around the marble foyer, loudly bragging into her phone about her $600 hair highlights, while their sons aggressively tore open custom, Tier 1 catering boxes filled with gourmet pastries. My twins, Toby and Chloe, were absolutely exhausted. I had rushed them straight from their daycare to the party after finishing a back-to-back shift, leaving absolutely no time for lunch. Their eyes locked onto a beautifully glazed Danish sitting on the edge of the counter. Shivering with hunger, Toby reached his tiny, trembling hand out toward the plate. Before his fingers could even graze the pastry, Marcus lunged forward. His hand slammed onto the polished stone counter like a thunderclap, violently rattling the silver cake servers. "Keep your hands off. Your mother should have fed you already," he roared, his face contorting with absolute disgust. He violently snatched the plate away, deliberately throwing a handful of paper napkins straight at my crying children's faces. I froze, looking over at my father, desperately expecting him to defend his own grandchildren. Instead, he just scoffed, swirled his coffee, and muttered, "Plan better next time, Sarah." The room grew deathly cold. Every ounce of unrequited love I held for them instantly died. I looked them dead in the eye, my voice dangerously calm. "There won't be a next time." I grabbed my sobbing kids and walked out. The heavy wooden door slammed shut behind us, cutting off the sound of Marcus's pretentious party. I strapped Toby and Chloe into their car seats, their soft sobs gradually fading into the quiet rhythm of the evening. As I drove away from the estate, a thick, low-lying fog began to roll across the Sacramento roads, mirroring the absolute numbness that had enveloped me. But beneath that numbness, something else was happening. For 28 years, I had walked on eggshells, desperately begging for crumbs of affection from a father and brother who viewed me as nothing more than a burden. Now, looking at my children through the rearview mirror, that desperate girl vanished. The cloud of manipulation finally lifted, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp clarity. Before I tell you what happened when the midnight phone call started, take a quick second to comment below with the city or country you're watching from. I love seeing how far Sarah's story has reached, and if you've ever had to cut off toxic family to protect your own peace, let me know in the comments. As the highway stretched out before me, a memory buried deep in my mind began to surface. Marcus and my father believed they held all the power because they ran the family bakery. They legalistically controlled the brand, the kitchen equipment, and the grand corporate contracts. But there was one critical, monumental detail that their supreme arrogance had caused them to completely overlook. Marcus might have owned the business, but he didn't own a single inch of the land it sat on. 3 years ago, as my mother lay in her quiet hospital room during her final days, she pulled me close and slipped a small, cold brass key into my hand. She told me a secret that she had kept hidden from my father and Marcus for decades. The prime commercial lot in downtown Sacramento, the very ground where our family's highly profitable bakery had stood for 20 years, had been purchased entirely with her own private inheritance. She knew my father's reckless financial habits and Marcus's unchecked greed, so she had placed the property deed into a private, ironclad trust. The terms were absolute. The land belonged solely to me, legally maturing the exact day I turned 28. Marcus and my father were so blinded by their own superiority that they genuinely believed the property was a general estate asset under their complete control. They never bothered to check the foundational paperwork. My 28th birthday had passed just last week, meaning the deed was now officially registered under my name. Marcus had just blindly signed a multi-million-dollar corporate contract that legally required a 20-year commercial lease renewal, a renewal he had arrogantly scheduled for this upcoming month, assuming it would be a mindless formality. Instead of shedding another tear for my broken family, I pulled over into a quiet parking lot, my hand steady as I dialed my late mother's trusted trust attorney, Mr. Harrison. I gave him clear, unwavering instructions to draft an immediate commercial eviction notice and a formal, absolute refusal to renew the bakery's lease. They wanted to starve my children. Now I was going to strip away the very ground they stood on. The digital notice hit my brother's legal team at exactly 8 o'clock that evening. By the time I finished tucking Toby and Chloe into their beds, kissing their foreheads, and walking down to the kitchen to pour myself a hot cup of chamomile tea, the storm had officially crossed the horizon. I sat down in the quiet dark of my living room and deliberately flipped my phone onto silent, placing it face down on the wooden coffee table. Almost instantly, the screen began to glow, casting a rhythmic, frantic light against the dark walls. It didn't stop. For the next 4 hours, the device buzzed continuously with terrifying urgency, a relentless lifeline of a crumbling dynasty trying to drag me back into their grasp. By midnight, the digital counter on my home screen displayed a staggering 88 missed calls. When the silence finally returned, I took a slow sip of my tea and began scrolling through the visual voicemails, listening to the architectural collapse of their arrogance. The first few messages from Marcus were predictably furious, his voice booming with toxic, self-righteous indignation, demanding to know how I dared try to sabotage his life's work. But as the hours ticked by, the tone shifted drastically. The anger evaporated, replaced by a raw, weeping panic that I had never heard from the Golden Boy before. The final voicemail was from my father, his voice trembling and entirely stripped of his usual condescending bite. "Sarah, please!" he practically begged, the background noise echoing with Marcus's muffled, frantic shouting. "We are family. The banks are threatening to call in all our equipment loans if we lose this location. This contract is everything. You will completely ruin us." I locked the screen, the darkness swallowing the room once again. They hadn't cared about ruining my children's dignity, and I felt absolutely no guilt watching theirs burn. The next morning, the heavy glass doors of Mr. Harrison's office clicked shut behind me, sealing out the humid Sacramento air. Marcus and my father were already trapped in the lobby, pacing the floor like caged animals. The absolute contrast to the night before was staggering. Their designer suits were wrinkled, their hair was disheveled, and the supreme arrogance that usually defined their posture had completely vanished, leaving behind two desperate, broken men. As Mr. Harrison led us into the stark white conference room, Marcus lunged toward me, trying to paste a pathetic, trembling smile across his face. "Sarah, sis, thank God you're here," he stammered, reaching out a hand that I instantly bypassed. "Look, about last night. It was just the stress of the contract launch. We didn't mean anything by it. We're family, Sarah. We can easily fix this minor lease misunderstanding." I climbed calmly into my seat, looking at him with an expression as cold as stone. "You didn't care about family when you threw napkins at my hungry children's faces," I replied, my voice slicing through his desperate act. Mr. Harrison stepped in, sliding a thick legal folder across the mahogany table. He explicitly laid down the terms. There would be no negotiation, no lease renewal, and absolutely no extensions. Marcus's face drained of what little color it had left. He had blindly taken out massive, high-interest equipment loans using the new corporate contract as leverage, a contract that was now entirely void without a physical location for the bakery. Without this land, he was looking at immediate personal bankruptcy and total ruin. Their empire was built on top of my mother's legacy, and I was finally reclaiming it. Over the next 3 months, the legal dominoes fell exactly as I had planned. Unable to secure a new commercial property or refinance his high-interest equipment loans, Marcus was forced to liquidate the entire bakery business. He had to sell his luxury cars and his sprawling Granite Bay estate just to keep the creditors and banks from dragging him into a bankruptcy court. My father, realizing his precious golden boy was completely ruined and penniless, actually had the audacity to show up at my apartment, subtly suggesting that it was my family duty to take him in. I firmly closed the door directly in his face, completely cutting the final tie to my toxic past. I sold the highly valuable downtown commercial lot to a major real estate developer for a life-changing cash payout. With that money, I bought a beautiful sunlit cottage in Carmel overlooking the Pacific Ocean, ensuring my twins will never have to beg for a place at anyone's table again. What would you do if you were in my place? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.